We need to understand that engineers are created in elementary school. If you wait until high school, it's too late. And I'm not saying there won't be, a handful of people. It could be, there could be
Right.
thousands of people that break through, even though they had a poor proficiency at eighth grade. But, 5, 10, 15, 20,000, that's not enough to change the landscape of Black and Brown communities. We have to impact millions of students to really move forward. We can't wait on some corporation to throw a few $1 million. We can't wait for signatures and all that kind of stuff. The reality is, whether the PhDs and the studies, whether they come to the conclusion or not, the only resource that we have that can impact millions of students are the students who are proficient in mathematics. We've got to incentivize and suggest to young people who are great in math that they should start a side hustle. And that side hustle is to become a math tutor. A national tutoring initiative should be an outgrowth of identifying students who are proficient in math at every level of school. Those students could act as tutors, and the focus should be on math, because once you have that critical skill, you can do everything else.
Hello and welcome back to Custom Journeys. We're really excited to open up Black History Month with a wonderful guest. His name is George Smith. And Mr. Smith is an electrical engineer and also one of the 7 founding members for the National Society for Black Engineers, NSBE, an organization that has been shouted out almost every episode thus far in our podcast. We're so excited to have you, George. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure, my honor to join you.
We thought there was no better way to kind of start off Black History Month than talking to a living legend, somebody who had a hand in starting an organization that really has impacted countless Black engineers in this country and throughout this world. So I think it's great for us to have the honor to talk to you. I'm really excited to pick your brain about what it was like growing up in the modern civil rights era, being an engineer through the early 70s and early 80s, and then also your thoughts about the future of STEM and how we can diversify it. So let's go ahead and get into it, Mr. Smith. We talked about you being an electrical engineer at Purdue. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on what was really the first thing that got you interested in pursuing STEM.
Well, my thought process actually started in the 1960s. I was in elementary school. I graduated from elementary school in 1968. And on my eighth grade program, my career objective was listed as electrical engineer. So how does a sixth, seventh, and eighth grader come to that conclusion? Well, my story is not one of these stories about your typical inventor or tinkerer who breaks apart every gadget that he sees and looks inside and is curious. I wasn't that. My journey started because of a suggestion from my father. And my father was a superhero. So, anytime that he made a suggestion, then I took it very seriously. My father was remodeling our basement. One of his former jobs was as a carpenter. So he had all the skills to remodel that basement, everything except the electrical work. So while he was showing me what to do with the hammer and the saw and the nails and what have you, he had also said that he had to bring in an electrician. So when the electrician came in, my father said, "This guy has a good trade. You ought to talk to him about what it takes to become an electrician." So I walked over. I'll never forget the day the electrician was on the ladder wiring up the ceiling. And I asked him, "What do I need to do?" And he said, how good are you in math? And I said, it's my best subject. He said, well, you should go to college and major in electrical engineering. So it was a done deal right there. I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I told my father liked the idea, and anyone who asked me from that point forward what I wanted to do, they liked the idea. So even though I didn't know anything about it, I could see that people were impressed by the idea that this little kid wanted to be an electrical engineer. So roll the clock forward. First of all, my mother was an elementary school teacher. And she knew about this school, Lindblom Technical High School. Lindblom Technical High School was actually an experiment that started in 1964 to, appease the the cries for equal education opportunities. And they set up this pre-engineering curriculum at Lindblom Technical High School. And, and so by 1968, which was my freshman year, the first year of graduates from that program uh, were were on the podium. And there was a gentleman, a young man who was a senior, and he was a big time basketball player. The school's team was fantastic at that time, but he was being honored because of his scholarship. And he was being honored because he had straight A's 2 years in a row. And he got what they called the SM scholarship emblem. And he announced that he was going to Purdue University to major in electrical engineering. So that's only the second time in my life that I heard someone else say something about electrical engineering. My ears perked up. I was sitting next to a gentleman who became my best friend, Brian Harris, who's also a fellow founder of the National Society of Black Engineers. I thought I said it to myself, but he said I told him out loud that I was going to get straight A's 2 years in a row, get the S emblem, go to Purdue and major in electrical engineering, and learn how to play basketball. So, you know, and I did all of those things. Okay. My level of basketball was not, this guy was 6'8". I'm, 5'9", you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So my basketball pursuits were limited to the playground. Okay.
Gotcha.
But I played that game until I was 58 years old. So that's what launched, my interest. Uh,
George, can you talk about the foundation of NSBE and how this organization was initially formed?
what I like to tell people is, we were the right students at the right time. We got to Purdue. There were people there who were prepared to help us, and that environment was set up by Dr. Arthur Bond. He is the seventh founder. He's actually the first founder because he was there before us. We were 17, 18-year-old kids coming out of high school. Arthur Bond was, already an engineer. He was a seasoned veteran, literally, because he had served in the Army, full term in the Army. And he'd also worked as a technician, in the real world, working on Ruby laser technology when it was brand new to the world. There were some senior students, Ed Barnett in particular, who had already navigated in position to graduate from Purdue University in industrial engineering. So he knew what the challenge was, and he'd seen a lot of students fail on the way. So he said that he felt he had a responsibility. He and the other seniors who were making had a responsibility to the underclass. So, this is just great timing for six hard heads coming out of Chicago to come into an environment where not only do we have Art Bond, but we had these this, group of incredible Black seniors who had took an interest in us. So he decided that there should be a society of Black engineers. He went to the dean several times and got shot down. I don't know if it was the dean or the president, but he got shot down several times in his attempt to start an organization. They wanted him to just go and join ASME or ASCE, IEEE, join those organizations. You don't need a separate organization for Black folks. So it wasn't until he actually asked Art Bond to come in and be an advisor that he went back with a package that included a, a constitution that was literally handwritten by Dr. Bond. Okay, so he wrote the Constitution, the original Constitution for the Society of Black Engineers. And with Art's support, then the brass at Purdue University agreed to let us become a student organization. So Art was there. He pulled all sorts of strings, but the part about what he did that is not well known, he was a part of a national effort to expand opportunities for minorities in engineering. So that, it includes Hispanics, okay, and Indians and Blacks. He was part of that. And that whole thing started in 1972. There's actually a book that was published in 1974. Got it right here. I don't know if you can see that. Minorities in Engineering, Expanding Opportunities. Thing that the fellow is holding is a slide rule. That was a calculator. A slide rule was the calculator of its time. That was standard equipment. And all they, so when I introduce myself to young people and they tell them, well, when I started college, I started before the calculator was invented. And there's always, whoa, how old are you?
Calculator was up here. Was up here.
So I'm as old as the binding of this book. This thing, look at that thing.
Oh, yes, it's
Okay,
there.
that's how old I am. That I'm held together just like that. Okay. So I learned some things about what was happening, in the very beginning outside of the student bubble. See, most people had this view of students at Purdue being so, charismatic that, we, built this nation, right? Well, we did what students needed to do. Okay. That's what we did. But we didn't even realize the type of support that was happening, not just at Purdue University, but in other academic institutions and also in corporations. We had a support system at Purdue, and our classmates from high school that went to engineering programs at other schools did not have that type of support system. We learned about that when we would come home for holidays and summer breaks, and we compare notes with the other students that went to engineering schools. And I'll never forget this one guy in particular, Michael Joshua. When we told him about everything that was happening at Purdue, he said, man, I wish we had something like that at my school. He was majoring in mechanical engineering at the University of Missouri, Rolla. And so that was the seed that made it clear to us that there was a need. The National Society of Black Engineers and the way it's grown to the point now where we're talking about, 15 to 20,000 members worldwide. That doesn't happen unless there is a need. Okay.
Exactly.
And at the time, there was a dire need.
You grew up in the 1960s, but a time where you talked about in one interview where you were one of 28 Black engineering students on the entire campus of Purdue. And let's talk about one thing in particular that a lot of us struggle with today, minorities in particular, imposter syndrome, feeling like we don't belong in certain rooms, feeling like we're not worthy enough. What was the mindset you had going into college, and how did you get past any kind of imposter syndrome in order to be successful throughout your time in college and beyond?
Well, I had never thought about this until I read a book by Carl Reed, former national executive director of NSBE. I believe the title is Work Smarter, Not Just Harder. And in it, he describes multiple potential personalities that students come in with. He summarizes it really as being underconfident or overconfident. What you're describing is the imposter syndrome. I believe that's an example of being underconfident. I'm going to speak for myself and also the perception that I have for my colleagues. I can't really tell what was tell you what was in there. But I believe we came in overconfident. And, it's because we went to this Lindblom Technical High School, and the high school was held in such high esteem, and it still is today. It's still a top 20 high school in the state of Illinois. So we didn't have any higher reference point than the high school that we attended. So we came out of there thinking that we were elite to begin with. Okay.
Gotcha.
And so we also came up during the time and were heavily influenced by the confidence of Muhammad Ali. You know, I am the greatest. Okay. That was thrilling to see a black man, manage his business, manage his life with that type of confidence. So I think that was, part of our persona, as well. We it may have been perceived as cocky, and I think that would have been a reasonable description for us. The other thing that was unusual, at least from my perspective, is that I went to college with all of my best friends from high school. We had a clique, a social club. That's how high school is. You have these cliques in high school. And we had all met on the track team in our freshman year of high school. We just so happened to have many of the same classes. And so we were already a team. We were already an organization, okay? Because we had, formerly had a social club that we were part of. We called ourselves the Brothers of Black Magic, okay? So, that ought to tell you something, right? Uh, so, for us, we're from the big city. We're from Chicago.
Yeah.
It's nothing better than Chicago, okay? And we're going to, West Lafayette, Indiana. Well, what's that? Who's heard of West Lafayette, Indiana? We were going there on a mission, and we had no idea what to expect. And it was shocking, the cultural difference that we had to deal with. But, we buckled down and we reversed the trend. The flunk out rate and dropout rate of Black engineering students at Purdue University was 80%
Wow.
for the freshman class before we got there. In our freshman year, we turned that statistic on its head. 80% of our freshman class went on to the sophomore year. We flipped the script completely. And all of my colleagues and we all had B averages at the end of our freshman year. And that's a great indicator whether or not you're going to make it. Now, that was still, at least for me, that was a shocking change because in high school, I would come out of a test saying things like, well, I know I had a minimum score of 97. you know, then I get to college in engineering classes and they're grading on the curve, and 50% might be an A. Okay. So it was a totally different, and so the idea of, mastering the material was hard to, really feel like you had mastered the material going from one class to another.
Awesome.
But we were able to keep up, as simple as that.
And this is great. But now, seeing that need back in the 50s of needing that workforce, right, in engineering, how do you see that now? And then this will step into the next question, which is how do we move forward in continuing that legacy that Nesby started?
There are jobs that exist now that will disintegrate. Millions of jobs will disintegrate. Okay. And those jobs will be replaced by millions more jobs, but those jobs will require STEM skills. Okay. And, preparation for the workforce is different, and it will be different in the future. There'll be a higher level of education required to prepare and to execute these jobs in the future. That is going to be typical going forward. We have robotics now. Robotics is going to replace jobs. And they even talking about cobots now. Have you ever heard that term? Cobots.
They're like a group,
Have you
like
ever
a
heard that
swarm of
term?
robots.
No, the robot is your
Oh,
coworker.
okay.
Cobots.
Okay.
Okay. So you're gonna have to be able to design a robot, repair a robot, build a robot, sell a robot, do the accounting for a robot company, program a robot. Okay. These are the types of jobs that will be plentiful. The days of just coming out of high school and applying for a job and, having the, minimum qualifications of just being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. We're going, those days are quickly coming to a close. Quickly.
Mm.
Okay. So the only way to prepare my grandson, who is in sixth grade now, is to help him understand. I actually have three grandchildren, sixth, eighth, and 10th grade. My recommendations are for all of them to study some type of engineering and then go on from there to pursue whatever, they want to do. Engineering, in my view, is going to be the best baseline education to prepare students to participate in the STEM economy. One of the things that I attempted to do, particularly during Black History Month, is to talk about the history of Black inventors. In my opinion, too much emphasis on the struggle. Don't want to forget the struggle, okay? But 90% of our discussion about Black history should not be the discussion, the struggle. We should be talking about achievements. At least 50% of the discussion should be about achievements, historical achievements. And there are lots of, great, wonderful stories that need to be told about the contributions of Black and Hispanic inventors. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a National Inventors Hall of Fame of Black and Hispanic uh, inductees in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. It's set up by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. At this point, there are 29 Blacks in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Who knew? Okay. Who knew? And so, we think about the month of February. You could talk about a National Inventors Hall of Fame inductee every day of the month.
Yep.
Okay. And so education should provide new information, not just continue to rehash the same old information people already know. So it's, Black history curriculum in schools is a prop.
Big problem.
Okay.
Big
To say
problem.
It's
to
a
say the
prop.
least.
right? And, and so one way that that problem can be eradicated is by talking about these, these inventor achievements. Now, I realize there's other achievements outside of, the STEM community, outside of, the invention community, but that's what I talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
We agree, George, that engineering and STEM education enables someone to have their own custom journey and have success in it. Now that you've put the problem in its context, what would you recommend moving forward of how to bring in more STEM professionals and make it more colorful, more black, more brown, more female in the incoming future?
As a population, we need to understand that engineers are created in elementary school. Okay. If you wait until high school, it's too late. I saw a report by the ACT, the College Testing
Mhm.
Organization, and in that report, they said if the student does not have uh, math proficiency by eighth grade, it's too late. They're never going to have it.
Wow.
Okay. Now, when I say they're never going to have it, I'm talking about the general population. I'm not saying there won't be, a handful of people. It could be, there could be
Right.
thousands of people that break through, even though they had a poor proficiency at eighth grade. But, 5, 10, 15, 20,000, that's not enough to change the landscape of Black and brown communities. We have to impact millions of students. You add them all up, right? And you're looking at 7 million, more than 7 million Black kids. That's how many kids need to be impacted. When you're talking about having millions of students, okay? So, so where do we go? We go into second and third grade classrooms and we start recruiting right there. We have, a certain percentage of our population, Black and brown kids, that have the knack,
Right.
in spite of whatever their support system is, they have the knack for math. Okay. Uh, but we have 87% that are below proficiency standards by the time they get to eighth grade. Those of us who grew up in the Black community, we know how, in the brown community, we know how smart our people are. Okay. So I know that instead of 87% being below proficiency, we can have 87% above proficiency. So it has to be a joint effort. Uh, Teachers need to innovate the way they teach mathematics and science. I knew we had an issue when my grandson came home at the end of second grade and said, math is boring. I said, oh, this is a problem. You know, well, it may be boring, but you're going to be good at it. Okay. This is a skill you must master. There was no negotiation there. And so,
He's got a legacy to uphold.
I, I called our daughter, his mom, and I said, hey, look, there's a new summer camp and they have free lunch. It's 5 minutes from where you live. Um, it's a half day math camp and a half day sports camp, and uh, it's free. And she said, oh, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's called GMA and GPA camp. Okay, GMA is
It sounds like
grandmother.
your house, yeah.
Okay, and I am GPA. Okay. And so she said, well, sign me up. Strong belief. But the only thing I ever tutored my grandson in was mathematics. He gets, A's in everything else.
I'm sorry to cut you off, George. Quick question about that. So once his proficiency level improved, his math skills improved, does he now like math, or what is kind of his perception real quick?
Okay, well, it's an interesting dynamic because I asked him, do you and your crew, all these kids now, his best friends, they're all in advanced math. And I said, you guys like math? He said, no.
Oh, wow.
They don't like it. They still don't like it. Okay. So that means that, there's something wrong with the way that it's being taught. Okay. But nevertheless, they come from households where, math mastery is a requirement to, to get, to get dinner. Okay. Math is a requirement. So his attitude did change. It went from saying math is boring to math is easy,
Yeah.
and I'll take it. I'll take it. Math is easy.
I was able to catch a little bit of an interview you did where you kind of talked about your views. And number one, you just hit on the one about exposing kids and recruiting kids as early as second and third grade. You also had an idea about creating a national tutoring program, which I thought was a really great idea. A tutoring slash mentoring program where kids that are a little bit more senior or one or two grades above can go back and tutor their peers in different math skills. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
So I've been thinking about the fact that we need to impact millions. Well, we don't have programs with the capacity for millions of students. So that's number one. If you think about engineering design 101, you have to design something with the capacity for, the people that you're trying to impact. And so the reality is, whether the PhDs and the studies, whether they come to the conclusion or not, the only resource that we have that can impact millions of students are the students who are proficient in mathematics. And the focus should be on math, because once you have that critical skill, you can do everything else. That's, my strong belief. So the concept here of having a national tutoring initiative should be an outgrowth of identifying the A and B students who are proficient in math at every level of school already. Okay. So you have students in middle school who are proficient. Those students could act as tutors for the K through 5 student population. And the students in high school who are proficient in math could act as tutors for the middle school population. So in general, you know, that's how I'd like people to start thinking about, this resource. So, and those students are easy to identify. The school knows. So that would be ideal, to get every Black kid, every Hispanic kid that's already demonstrated great skill in math, and have them to become tutors. And, there should be something in it for them. They're not going to just do it out of the goodness of their heart, right? They have other things they could do with their time. So they should be compensated for that effort. I'm still of the, bootstraps, pull yourself up from the bootstraps, just like we did, in the Society of Black Engineers. We didn't have budgets, okay? We didn't have any money to spend, okay? But we found a way to creatively accomplish our objectives. So, to really, move forward, we can't wait on, some corporation to throw a few $1 million. You know, we can't wait for signatures and all that kind of stuff. Okay. We've got to incentivize young and suggest to young people who are great in math that uh, they should start a side hustle. Okay. And that side hustle is to become a math tutor.
No, before we close, my final thought, George, is that there almost every single person we've interviewed, and we interviewed over a dozen people so far the past year or so, have been positively influenced by NSBE in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure you get that all the time, but it's been such a heartening thing to see how this one organization has influenced and provided so much support for a lot of young kids out there. So thank you for that. And I'm sure you'd say you're standing on the shoulder of giants, but we'll say the same thing for you, that we ourselves are standing on the shoulders of your giant. All right. So thank you so much, George.
Thank you.
Now, before we close out, is there anything or anyone you would like to shout out, organization that you would like to shout out before we close today?
I just want to say that there is a category of organizations that have evolved, and I call them STEMpreneurs. So these are the executive directors of nonprofit organizations that offer STEM enrichment programs. And so from what I've been able to observe, they each operate independently. And I think what is needed is a similar organization to NSBE for STEMpreneurs. Now, I don't know what that should be called, but a STEM organization where these people who are leading these organizations can share their best practices for not only what they deliver, but also how they go to market and grow their organizations. Because I fully believe that those organizations are a vital part of what we need to fill the pipeline. They're not, they can't fulfill all the capacity needs we have, but they do an excellent job of preparing the students that they're able to reach. So, so I'll just say shout out to all the STEMpreneurs out there. Thank you for what you do.
I'm really glad and thankful that you mentioned that. And what better example than Nesby? So I think the example has been set. It's just a matter of getting us all together on the same page and one accord. But thank you for shouting that out.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening.
Yep.
No, it was our honor, and on our behalf, thank you so much, George. This has been Custom Journeys. I'm Eliseo, here with my co-host Andrew, and we're out of here. Thank you,
Take care.
George.
Thanks, George.
Great job.